We have Niko Price taking on Phil Rowe. A possible fight of the night opportunity at 170 pounds. And for Niko Price, Matt, like, this guy's had a really long UFC career. Maybe you don't think of it that way, but 7-5 with 2 no contests. His no contest, he beat Alex Morono by TKO. It's a no contest due to cannabis. He beat Cowboy Cerrone by majority decision. It's a no contest because cannabis. So 2 no contests.
If you had 14 kids, you probably would too.
4 no or 2 no contests for that. But for Niko Price, again, 7-5 in the UFC. And since he came into the UFC in 2016, for Price, he's kind of been that guy, like that gut check in the top 20 the whole time. Like, the whole time he's been in the UFC, he's been fighting kind of those guys.
There's skill checks for pretty much everything in the UFC. At some point, you have to fight a dominant wrestler. At some point, you have to fight somebody who uses a lot of leg kicks. Niko Price is that guy you have to fight when you have to get into a brawl, because he is going to defend your takedowns well enough. He's not a great wrestler by any means, but he is tricky off of his back. We've all seen it many times. His knockout over Randy Brown, how crazy that is off his back. But since he is, again, he's not a zero on the map by any means, I do think Niko Price is that very difficult test for any fighter making their way up the rankings. Hell, Vicente Luque had to do it 2 times. The UFC likes him so much as that gatekeeper. I just think for Price, though, and I mentioned this for Marcelo Rojo earlier on in the card, how much does he have left in the tank? We all know those people out there who burn that candle from both ends, and Niko Price's fight style burns that candle from both ends. Think about the amount of damage he's taken just from those 2 Vicente Luque fights alone. Those are 2 of the crazier fights you will ever go back and watch. I just always worry about that with Niko Price. To his credit, though, it did feel like he was taking a lot of fights just back to back to back to back, and it has been a little while since we've seen him in the cage, so maybe that has given him time to really rest his body. We will get just a better version of Niko Price this week.
Last fight for Niko Price was back October of last year, so a long time to recoup, regroup, and get ready for this one, and he's a fighter based out of Florida, so homecoming type of fight for Niko Price. For Phil Rowe, could also be considered that way because he trains at a Fusion XL in the Orlando area. He's originally out of New York, and if you do look at it for Phil Rowe, so interesting. Like, he's going to have, and I'll bring it up right there, he's going to have a little bit of a height advantage, but a massive reach advantage over most of the guys. I mean, 4 inches of reach in this fight, 3 inches of height. But he's one of those guys that when it starts to flow, it gets really good. He can get taken down by wrestlers. You saw that. Orion Cosey, Jason Witt had a lot of success at the start. And they both got finished. And in his fight against Gabe Green, they get dropped twice. In the second round, he got dropped in the third round. So for Rowe, again, it's just bringing it all together. Did he struggle a little bit against Shabazian? Sure. Then he finished him on Dana White's Contender Series. So Rowe is a really, really interesting type of guy. MPTV in the comments saying, would it surprise anyone if Phil Rowe won? No. So that's sort of why I'm picking him. Like, he is a really tricky fighter, and I have this written, like, for Niko Price, first 8 fights were from a promotion you'd expect Niko Price to fight for and win with.
Buffalo Wild Wings?
All with fight time. Fight time!
Yeah.
It's time. Like, Volkan Oezdemir probably ran that. But for Phil Rowe, again, I have it like, wrestle boxers beware, because if you fight him, eventually the tide's just going to turn, and it's Phil Rowe's day.
The problem is, though, Niko Price crashes into every striking engagement he has ever been involved in his life. He's not someone who strikes a lot from the pocket, which is weird. A lot of fighters stay on the outside, work their way into the pocket, and then get a lot of the work done. Niko Price is kind of the counter to that. It's, hey, I have great power on the outside, and that's the thing. Think about Amanda Nunes and how she hits fighters at the extent of her punching power. She's not hitting fighters when they're really close to her. She's utilizing all of her reach, and Niko Price is cut from that cloth. I know you brought up some of the statistics of Phil Rowe and how big of a fighter he is for the weight division, but I don't think Niko Price is going to struggle with that whatsoever. He's a guy who is going to use his kicks a lot. He's going to use his very long, straight punches, so oddly enough, Niko Price, I think, is going to fight much bigger than he is, because he always does, so I think that's going to be an interesting thing to watch out for. My issue is, Price is going to throw kind of those 2 long, prodding front kicks, and then jump into boxing with 2 really kind of wonky shots. Yes, they are damaging if they land, but I think at a certain point, your unorthodox kind of comes back to bite you. You know, like, you can be that weird wonky fighter, but when there's enough tape out there on you, people are going to figure you out. And it's not that Phil Rowe does anything all that flashy. He really is kind of a meat and potatoes fighter. He doesn't throw, you know, crazy spin kicks like Isaiah Rodriguez, but I do think kind of the basics of his game and of his boxing are really going to be difficult for Niko Price to deal with. Now, could Price land one of those weird, awkward, off-angled shots from basically anywhere in the cage? Yes, and that's what is always going to make him a very dangerous fighter. even when he's 41 years old, if he's still in the UFC at that point, he's going to be in these action type of brawls. But for me, I look at Niko Price as a guy who's going to go on to fight, you know, a Max Griffin, a Tim Means maybe. I look at Phil Rowe as a guy who, if he's able to get past Niko Price, maybe they give him Vicente Luque coming off a loss to Jeff Neal. Maybe they give him a borderline ranked fighter, or at least somebody on that top 20 scale, like you would mention Niko Price being in. I just feel like for Rowe, there's tremendous upside in this pick, whereas for Price, we kind of know what we're going to get.
Yeah, it really is a weird one when it does come down to it. And in the comments section, we have Price as a brawler, but it's a toss-up. Rowe's significant reach advantage is a factor too, but sometimes he doesn't really use it, so it all depends. And then we also have, I believe, experience will prove helpful
and that's a good point.
Price. So if we have a look at the odds in the matchup, Niko Price, a slight favorite here, open minus 135, minus 141. Phil Rowe, open plus 115. And then he was a favorite. Now he's a plus 115 again. We have a look over on Topology, and this is where I think it's going to get spicy. Votes are surprised us, ARDU. I'm going to say over under 65% Niko Price, because I don't know where it's going to be.
I think they'll be under. I think they'll be close to 50.
Yeah, so 1,916 total votes, 54% Price, 47% by decision, 41% by knockout. For the 46% that have Rowe, 25% by decision, 65% by knockout. I think that if Phil Rowe wins this fight, it's going to be by submission. I don't think he's going to knock out Niko Price. Even though Price is there to get hit, if you look at it for Phil Rowe, I mean, like, yeah, again, you think about Randy Brown. He got into the grappling, and Niko Price had his day.
It was so weird.
But if you look at it for Phil Rowe, I think Rowe is that kind of guy that can get it done if it does get down to the mat. But I do have a hard time on this pick, like a lot of people are saying.
Exactly. Niko Price fights are always going to be very difficult fights. You're not going to just beat Niko Price in the first round and just get out of the fight. Like, he's going to make it
all over.
It's going to be bonus worthy every time you're in there with Niko Price. And that's why I think this is a good test for Phil Rowe. If he's able to beat someone like Niko Price, let's say he does get a submission or a TKO in like the third round or late in the second round, we're going to learn a lot about Phil Rowe moving forward. Maybe we will think he is justified to fight some of those ranked fighters or borderline ranked fighters. I do like Rowe in this matchup though, and I think this is going to be a great fight. I really do.
Todd's hanging out in the comments section. Ian Campbell and Hype MMA. Appreciate everybody for joining us so far. So your pick here is Phil Rowe?
It is. Even though I really like watching Niko Price fight, I'd watch him fight a box full of pool noodles. I just think the exciting factor of him is going to come back to bite him, and I like Phil Rowe for that reason.
I'm going to take Rowe ever so slightly, but guys, I'm really on the fence. Like I said, I have a really hard time with this one. Rowe, I don't necessarily think his style is conducive to getting wins against pressure fighters. We saw Gabe Green fight in a style that's somewhat similar to Niko Price, where he just threw a lot of volume, started to add power to his shots. And then once you get Phil Rowe backed up, well, that reach advantage is gone. And Rowe likes to back up and wait and wait and wait. And then you're behind the black line. And then you're up against the cage. And then you're either getting taken down or hammered on it at a certain point. So Price has a definite method to win in this fight. I think Rowe's got the power. And I like his jiu-jitsu. But I do have a hard time on this one.
It's a really fun fight, though. Like, I can't stress that enough. This could be an awesome.
Todd saying, brush up on the like, why don't you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Shout out to both these guys, though. Like you had mentioned, they're both in Orlando. And they did a shoe drive for kids today. And that's cool. Normally, MMA is just full of mean people saying mean things to each other, but for a difference,
I think the world's about that right now.
Yeah, but for Niko Price and Phil Rowe, like, that's the thing. These guys have no animosity. Like, we're as excited for this fight as any other on the card, and these guys were, like, chumming it up today, doing it for a good cause. So just shout out to these guys, because MMA could be a place where, like, it's all negative, but Niko Price and Phil Rowe aren't those negative kind of guys.